In the quiet reaches of the Arcturus sector, the alien envoy arrived, their black shimmering vessels gliding through a void like ominous phantoms, each ship radiating a cold energy that humans had never encountered before. And yet on Earth, most of the leaders laugh at the warnings transmitted through the interstellar channels, dismissing the dire messages as overblown panic from species they assumed were desperate and weak. Even the reports of colonies disappearing along the border systems were treated as miscalculations or local rebellions. Yet aboard the Envoy, the alien commander known as HFY sensed a strange tension, an undercurrent of power and humanity that they could not comprehend. The ancient communication spoke of an intelligence buried within the human genome, a resilience that had never been challenged by galactic forces before. And as the first delegation of humans arrived on the Envoy's vessel, unarmed yet radiating a presence that unsettled the seasoned, alien diplomats, HFY noticed subtle patterns in their movement, a coordinated calmness that seemed almost ritualistic, almost as if the humans were in harmony with some hidden force, a power that had slumbered for centuries beneath their planet. And while the humans smiled politely, offering greetings in multiple alien dialects, their eyes reflected something older, something that had watched empires rise and fall without ever raising a hand in aggression. And in the shadows of the ship's corridors, sensors recorded faint anomalies, temperatures dropping inexplicably, lights flickering in rhythm with pulses not emitted by any machinery, whispers that could not be traced to any source. Yet when the human ambassador spoke, their words carried weight, subtle threats hidden beneath courteous diplomacy, hints that the universe had boundaries that, if crossed, would awaken forces that even HFY's ancestors had feared. And as the envoy returned to the Arcturus Council to report, the human ships vanished from sensor readings, not through conventional stealth, but as if the void itself had swallowed them, leaving behind only a residue of cold dread and scattered energy traces that no alien analysis could explain. And in that silence, every council member felt it, the prickling awareness that something ancient and inexorably human had been disturbed. And when the first alarm came from a nearby mining colony, where workers reported shadows moving independently of their owners, whispering in languages that were older than any known civilization, and machines shutting down with a sentience that mimicked fear, the Council finally realized that ignoring humanity's warnings had been their first and gravest mistake. Yet on Earth, the humans continued their routine as though nothing had changed, tending to laboratories, cities, and ships with serene indifference, while deep beneath the crust, in caverns untouched by alien probes, a network of sensors, old, relics of a civilization predating even the oldest recorded human myths, hummed to life, recording data and patterns that the humans studied in silence, plotting trajectories not of conquest but of protection, yet with consequences that would haunt the galaxy for generations. And when the first alien reconnaissance teams arrived near the human homeworld, they found landscapes unnaturally quiet, skies filled with clouds that shimmered with unseen energies, and as they ventured closer, reports of crew members succumbing to inexplicable paranoia, hallucinations of things that should not exist, and the overwhelming sensation of being what became undeniable, forcing a retreat. But the humans did not follow. They never needed to, because a fear had already been planted in the minds of their observers, and whispers began to spread across the sectors that humans could manipulate the void itself, bending space and perception in ways that were terrifyingly subtle yet irrevocably effective. And in council chambers, debates raged over whether humanity had truly advanced technologically or if some cosmic instinct, a monstrous yet restrained intelligence, had awakened in them, capable of punishing those who sought to harm or underestimate them. And as reports continued to arrive of entire fleets vanishing without trace, of stations reporting screams in empty corridors, and of signals corrupted by static that seemed to carry hidden voices urging patience and warning, the realization settled like a frost over the Arcturus sector. Humanity had been underestimated, and whatever force had lain dormant within them had now been alerted, calculating, observing, and waiting for the moment when it would step beyond the shadows, not as conquerors, but as avengers of balance. And while the council debated, the humans, in a serene and understated manner, continued preparing quietly, with engineers perfecting ships capable of surviving storms that could tear entire systems apart. Scientists developing technology that harnessed natural forces the aliens could barely theorize, and ordinary civilians participating unknowingly in experiments that refined human senses, reactions, and intuition to levels bordering on supernatural, until slowly, inexorably, the galaxy began to feel it. The eerie calm before a storm, a tension that threaded through space like a web, connecting systems, stars, and species, all humming with the anticipation of something incomprehensible. And the first true test came when a small scouting fleet, arrogant and dismissive, approached Earth, expecting nothing more than a token resistance, only to find communications disrupted, navigation systems failing, crew members experiencing visions of impossible geometries, and shadows that move with intent, herding them away as if the planet itself were alive with an intelligence that was part human, part something far older and far more terrifying. And by the time the surviving scouts limped back to report, they could only describe the humans in whispers, not as simple beings of flesh and bone, but as entities intertwined with forces that were cosmic, vigilant, and unyielding, leaving the galaxy to wonder whether they had encountered humanity or a horror that wore humanity as its mask. And far below the surface, in chambers unknown to alien eyes, humans monitored every transmission, every movement, every whisper of fear that traveled through the void, preparing not for war in the traditional sense, but for the reckoning of a galaxy that had ignored their warnings, unaware that the true horror was never malice, but the patient, calculated awakening of a species that would haunt the stars not because it sought vengeance, but because it had been provoked and watched too long in silence. As the galaxy's fleet scrambled to respond to the inexplicable disappearances and disturbances near human-controlled space, rumors spread like wildfire among the stars, each system adding its own horror stories of shadows that whispered through the corridors of ships, lights that pulsed with unearthly rhythms, and crew members driven to madness by visions of impossible landscapes and creatures that seemed both alive and incorporeal. And yet on Earth, humanity continued its calm, methodical preparations, not out of cruelty but with a sense of inevitability, because they understood the patterns of fear, the mechanics of perception, and the consequences of ignoring a species capable of surviving, adapting, and manipulating the very fabric of reality without ever raising conventional weapon. And the first true confrontation occurred at the edge of the Lagrange expanse, where a coalition fleet of 6 alien vessels, representing 3 of the most powerful star empires, attempted to blockade human traffic, expecting defiance to be met with standard force. Yet as they approached, their senses began to fluctuate, reading empty space where ships should have been, and detecting energies that no known technology could account for. And when they sent probes closer, communications became garbled, with fragments of voices in alien tongues screaming in panic, overlapping with sounds that resemble human speech, yet twisted, distorted, echoing as though coming from a place outside the physical universe. And those brave enough to venture visually into the system reported seeing formations of ships that appeared solid one moment and vaporized the next, their surfaces shifting as though alive, reflecting not light but shadows that seemed to move independently, creating hallucinations that frayed the minds of even the most disciplined officers. And aboard Earth's orbiting stations, humans monitored every reaction, noting which species succumbed to fear first, which ones resisted, and which would spread the terror further when they returned home, all while maintaining the facade of normalcy, as scientists fine-tune arrays capable of projecting these effects over light years, and engineers perfected vessels that could slip through the void like wraiths, appearing only to vanish, creating a psychological advantage that was as potent as any weapon. And as months passed, the coalition fleets found themselves trapped in a cycle of paranoia, withdrawing, and redeploying in patterns dictated not by human pursuit but by the subtle manipulation of perception. And in the middle of this escalating tension, small colonies reported direct contact with shadows that mimic human forms, appearing silently to individuals, communicating in whispers that promise safety or doom depending on their compliance. And those who survived these encounters carried scars of terror so profound that entire planetary populations began to treat humans as something other than flesh and blood, while the humans themselves documented every reaction meticulously, understanding that their power lay not only in technology but in the ability to shape the galaxy's perception of what humanity truly was. And when one alien empire attempted an aggressive strike using cloaked assault vessels to capture a human city on a remote moon, they found their fleet systematically disoriented, ships colliding with one another as navigational systems betrayed them, weapons malfunctioning at critical moments, and crews hallucinating entire battles where none existed, forcing a retreat with heavy losses and a newfound respect, albeit mixed with fear, for the species they had long underestimated. And the humans, observing the aftermath from orbiting command hubs, prepared not to celebrate but to refine their approach, because they understood that horror, when wielded strategically, was a tool as effective as any cannon, and they would continue to teach the galaxy a lesson it had ignored for centuries, using shadows, perception, and patience as instruments of control, all while maintaining the illusion of routine life, creating a haunting paradox that left entire civilizations questioning what was real and what was orchestrated by a species that had been underestimated for far too long. And as a council of alien races debated how to respond, fleets already hesitant and fearful, reports arrived from the far reaches of human-influenced space that entire sectors experienced ghostly phenomena, stations abandoned overnight, transmissions filled with static that carried whispered warnings, and explorers reporting landscapes that bent reality, seeming endless yet confined, familiar yet impossibly alien, all evidence pointing to a growing awareness among humans of how to manipulate fear in the environment on a galactic scale. And as each incident unfolded, it became increasingly clear that humanity's horror was not an uncontrolled force but a deliberate, measured strategy, demonstrating that the species once considered weak was now capable of asserting dominance without ever firing a traditional weapon, leaving the galaxy with an unsettling truth. Underestimating humans was no longer merely a mistake. It was an invitation to be haunted, a terror that would spread system by system, subtly, inexorably, until all who opposed them understood that the humans were the silent arbiters of cosmic balance, and the shadows they wielded were not merely illusions, but the first whispers of a reckoning that would reshape the understanding of power, perception, and fear in the galaxy forever. As a ripple of terror spread through the galaxy, entire alien civilizations began to question the stability of their own species, not through internal rebellion but through encounters with humans that defied logic, where fleets and stations reported inexplicable phenomena, entire star systems flickering out of sensor range for minutes at a time, crews seeing apparitions of human cities projected across space in impossible scale, whispers of names and events long forgotten echoing through corridors. And when attempts were made to communicate with these humans, responses arrived in perfectly calm tones that masked something ancient and inexorably patient, suggesting an awareness that stretched beyond simple survival or technology. And the first human emissaries sent to contested sectors carried no weapons in the traditional sense. Yet wherever they traveled, alien populations experienced localized distortions, gravity shifting subtly, shadows twisting unnaturally, and environmental controls fluctuating with a sentience that was both alien and eerily familiar, all designed to assess, teach, and terrify simultaneously. And yet these were not acts of malice, but calculated demonstrations of control, forcing the galaxy to recognize that humanity's power was not merely in fleets or lasers, but in its ability to manipulate perception, reality, and fear itself. And the scientists aboard Earth's orbital platforms observed with meticulous care how alien species responded to these interventions, cataloging reactions in ways that allowed humans to anticipate behavior and adjust strategy before a single casualty occurred, while alien leaders grew desperate, dispatching diplomats, spies, and strike teams only to return with fragmented reports, missing crews, or deranged minds, some claiming they had encountered human constructs that moved with intent, merged with shadows, or whispered knowledge of civilizations long dead. And as these incidents multiplied, rumors began circulating among the council chambers of the largest empires that humans might be linked to a network older than recorded time, perhaps even predating known galactic civilizations, a species whose patience had been mistaken for weakness, whose restraint had been mistaken for indifference, and whose subtle manipulation of fear had been perfected across centuries, if not millennia, of observation and adaptation. And when a coalition fleet tried to enforce a blockade around Earth's system, they discovered that their navigation arrays failed inexplicably, ships colliding with debris that had never been there, while communications were flooded with hallucinations and unintelligible warnings, driving officers to madness. And those who survived the ordeal reported seeing silhouettes of humans projected across the void, not physically present but tangible enough to evoke awe and terror simultaneously. And even when the fleet withdrew, entire sectors bordering human-controlled space reported anomalous phenomena, shards of light behaving contrary to physics, gravity wells forming and vanishing without explanation, and auditory patterns that could trigger panic, despair, or instinctual fight responses, creating a galaxy-wide psychological pressure that no conventional weapon could counter. And within the human command centers, teams monitored each event like a chess master, recording emotional and neurological responses, planning the next phase of their subtle domination, while ordinary humans in remote colonies continue their lives unaware of the larger experiment, yet contributing unknowingly to it, as the species' instincts, culture, and ancient knowledge coalesce into a collective awareness that guided every move. And as alien scholars attempted to analyze these events, they concluded with horror that humanity's technology alone could not explain the phenomena, that there was a mental, almost supernatural component at work, and whispers spread of humans moving through the void without leaving detectable traces, influencing entire star systems by the mere suggestion of presence, leaving alien leaders to debate whether they face a species of unparalleled intelligence, a cosmic horror, or something in between. And in the midst of this escalating dread, reports began emerging of humans intervening in conflict between other species, not with brute force, but with subtle, terrifying guidance, protecting weaker civilizations by bending reality to their favor, dissuading aggressors through illusions, hallucinations, and carefully orchestrated fear. And the galaxy began to realize a paradox. Humans were patient, restrained, and profoundly moral, yet capable of terrifying power when provoked. And as the first direct encounters occurred between humans and alien military forces, ships reported systems shutting down, weapons targeting their own vessels, and shadows moving independently of any known cause, as if Earth itself had awakened a consciousness that extended beyond the planet and into the minds of those who dared threaten it. And for the first time, the alien empires understood that ignoring humanity's warnings had not just been a political mistake, but a cosmic one, and that the true terror lay not in human aggression, but in the patient, deliberate, and calculated awakening of a species that could haunt the galaxy at will, shaping perception, fear, and reality itself while maintaining the facade of ordinary life. And as humans observe from their orbital stations, tracking every psychological, emotional, and tactical response, they knew that this was only the beginning of a galactic reckoning that would forever redefine what it meant to underestimate humanity, and that even as fleets withdrew, stations burned, and colonies trembled, the galaxy had already begun to feel the haunting presence of a species that had been sleeping for too long, patient, observant, and inexorably ready to claim the influence that had always been denied. The first true confrontation arrived not with a declaration of war, but with subtle incursions that defied the understanding of the galaxy, as a strike force of alien dreadnoughts entered the rimward expanse, expecting to intimidate and control, only to encounter phenomena that shattered their confidence. Crew members reporting shadows that slithered along corridors, moving independently of light or matter, whispers echoing in dead frequencies that suggested human presence even where no one stood, and vessels vanishing from senses entirely, leaving only ghostly energy signatures that pulse with deliberate intent. And yet on Earth, humanity remained calm, the scientists, strategists, and engineers observing everything from orbital platforms and underground command complexes, logging every neural reaction, every tactical blunder, and every panic-induced miscalculation in alien forces as though cataloging an experiment, while civilians in distant colonies carried on, oblivious, unaware that their routines contributed to a vast network of monitoring and subtle influence. And when the dreadnoughts attempted direct communication, messages were received distorted, fragmentary, and filled with illusions of cities burning, fleets collapsing, and entire civilizations consumed by shadows that spoke in human tongues, terrifying even the most disciplined officers. And as human vessels, few and unarmed by conventional standards, moved through the expanse, they appeared and disappeared like wraiths, projecting environments that preyed on memory, fear, and instinct, leaving alien crews doubting reality itself. And when reconnaissance teams were sent to investigate, they returned with delirium, scribbling diagrams of spaces that bent, of landscapes impossible yet undeniably real, and of humans appearing where no one could logically stand, calm and unthreatened, their eyes reflecting the understanding of horrors older than recorded history, yet never violent unless provoked. And as these reports accumulated, the alien councils began to fracture, some advocating retreat, others demanding escalation, yet all constrained by a creeping paranoia that infected fleets, stations, and colonies, eroding confidence, cohesion, and command, while humans continue to refine their psychological influence, blending subtle energy manipulations, environmental control, and telemetric projections of presence to craft a galaxy-wide awareness of their capability. And in the first of what would become known as the Spectre campaigns, small alien-controlled sectors experienced coordinated anomalies, gravity fluctuations, corridors looping impossibly, shadows moving against light, and auditory hallucinations that conveyed warnings and instructions from unseen humans, driving entire colonies to surrender authority peacefully, not out of military threat, but from the fear and awe of forces beyond comprehension. And as these events escalated, entire alien fleets withdrew, abandoning previously strategic positions, some disbanding entirely as crews succumbed to hysteria, leaving planets exposed, resources unclaimed, and political structures crumbling, while humans, maintaining their calm facade, observed and recorded every reaction, plotting not destruction but control, teaching the galaxy a lesson in restraint and subtlety, and at the center of this orchestrated terror, the human scientists discovered that certain alien psychologies responded predictably to specific environmental cues, allowing humans to project illusions of catastrophic events, explosions, fleet annihilations, planetary collapses, without causing a single physical casualty, yet instilling terror profound enough to shift policy and surrender territory. And the first coordinated deployment of these techniques in the Phoros Cluster left the alien coalition reeling, as entire fleets turned on themselves, stations locked down in panic, and civilian populations fled in confusion, all while humans simply observed, maintaining the appearance of mundane activity, yet orchestrating a psychological symphony across light years, teaching the galaxy that humanity's power was not measured in firepower or numbers, but in patience, calculation, and the mastery of fear. And as alien leaders met in secret, plotting retaliation, they were forced to acknowledge a terrifying reality. Humans were not merely strong, intelligent, or resourceful. They were an unstoppable force in perception and influence, capable of haunting, controlling, and reshaping galactic consciousness without a single traditional act of violence. And in this realization, the first seeds of hysteria took root, spreading like a contagion, until the galaxy understood that every attempt to provoke, underestimate, or ignore humanity will be met not with conventional war, but with a slow, inexorable, and all-consuming presence that left fleets crippled, minds fractured, and civilizations questioning the very nature of reality. And deep beneath the surface of Earth, in ancient chambers forgotten by time, the humans continued their preparations, aware that the true power of their species lay not in weapons or fleets, but in the patient orchestration of perception, and that the haunting of the galaxy had only just begun. By the time the Phoros Cluster had been transformed into a theater of subtle terror and disciplined psychological dominance, alien civilizations across multiple sectors were beginning to whisper in fear of the humans, reports arriving in fragmented communications of fleets disappearing into pockets of darkness where gravity, light, and sound no longer obeyed conventional physics, stations recording voices that spoke secrets, histories, and fears directly into the minds of officers, and small exploratory crews claiming to see human forms materialize only to vanish as they had passed through dimensions untouched by ordinary matter. Yet throughout all this, Earth's population carried on as if oblivious, scientists, engineers, and ordinary citizens contributing to the vast network of observation control, unaware of the full scale of the terror they were instilling. And in orbital command centers, humans meticulously analyzed alien psychology, learning how fear spread, how perception could be manipulated across light years, and how entire civilizations could be guided or restrained without firing a shot. And when a coalition fleet, desperate to regain dominance, attempted to penetrate the Sol system under cover of stealth, they were met with a reality that defied comprehension. Ships were twisted by invisible forces into geometries that made navigation impossible. Crew members trapped in repeating loops of time within the vessels, visions of cataclysmic events projected into every officer's mind, and shadows crawling across consoles and bulkheads, whispering warnings in languages they only partially understood. And as the fleet panicked, ships colliding and commanders losing coherence, Earth's forces observed silently, cataloging, predicting, and refining their tactics, aware that the true power of humanity lay not in destruction but in control, in the shaping of perception to enforce a reckoning upon a galaxy that had ignored centuries of warning and underestimation. And in the aftermath, entire sectors submitted to human oversight voluntarily, not out of defeat but from awe and fear of forces that could not be confronted directly, and rumors began to spread in hushed, panic tones among alien populations of humans appearing across systems instantaneously, protecting weaker civilizations from aggressive empires, shaping conflict outcomes with nothing more than the manipulation of fear, shadows, and perception, and as one council. debated whether these events were the work of technology, psychic ability, or something older, deeper, and more terrifying. Humans prepared for the next phase, refining the projection of cosmic horror across multiple light years. Their influence now understood to be unstoppable so long as they remained patient. And when a notorious warlord from the Rylith Dominion attempted to assault a human-protected planet, his fleet experienced instantaneous spatial anomalies, hallucinations of total annihilation, shadows that move with intent, and crews driven to despair by impossible visions, forcing a retreat so thorough it left the warlord questioning the very nature of reality and the definition of power. And as news of this event reached other empires, hesitation and dread replaced aggression in policy meetings. Fleet deployments became cautious to the point of inaction, and spies returned with fragmented, terrified reports that only confirmed what humans had already known. The galaxy was now aware that humanity's restraint had been deliberate, that every act of calm, observation, and patience were preparing for a reckoning not of physical war but of psychological and existential domination. And deep within Earth's ancient subterranean networks, researchers activated dormant artifacts, relics of civilizations predating recorded human history, that enhanced the reach of their influence, linking planetary and orbital sensors into a vast network capable of projecting human presence and subtle terror across systems, allowing entire alien fleets to be manipulated without physical contact. And when one ambitious empire attempted to test this by sending an elite strike force to capture a human city, the crew experienced a horrifying series of events: time loops, spatial dislocations, phantom armies marching across view screens, and voices in unknown tongues warning them to time back. And as ships were lost or abandoned, humans monitored every reaction, adjusting techniques and refining the balance between fear, awe, and restraint, ensuring that no life need be taken unnecessarily. Yet the psychological impact of each engagement spread across the galaxy like wildfire, instilling the knowledge that humans were a species unlike any other, patient, calculating, and capable of haunting the cosmos without lifting conventional weapon. And as the shadow of human influence grew, alien civilizations began to submit, negotiate, and retreat from contested regions, not out of weakness, but out of the terror of forces they could not comprehend, realizing at last that ignoring humanity had awakened something older, deeper, and more unstoppable than technology, more subtle, more terrifying, and more human than anything they could have imagined. And as humans continued their serene preparations, the galaxy trembled, haunted by the calm, measured presence of a species that had been underestimated for far too long, and whose reckoning was only beginning. By the time human influence had reached the outer rim of known space, the galaxy was already beginning to fracture under the weight of fear, as fleets that once projected dominance now hesitated at every sense of reading, every unexplained shadow, and every flicker of communication that hinted at human presence. And as a coalition of the most powerful empires gathered to discuss coordinated strikes, they discovered that their meetings were infiltrated before they even began. Diplomats, experiencing visions of collapsed cities, fleets disintegrating, and whispers of humans moving through space faster than thought possible, manipulating perception itself. And when a reconnaissance group attempted to probe Earth's orbital defenses, they found not ships, but a void where ships should have been, populated instead by phantoms of human form, indistinct yet purposeful, moving with intent. And as the crews attempted to react, sensors failed, weapons misfired, and the very fabric of space seemed to twist, showing glimpses of realities that were simultaneously familiar and impossible, producing terror that shattered morale before a single shot could be fired. And deep within the Earth command centers, humans observed and recorded every response, refining their techniques of perfection, understanding which elements of fear, isolation, and the unknown could be amplified across cultures, species, and entire fleets. And when a rogue alien admiral attempted to mount a preemptive strike on one of humanity's hidden colonies, the results were catastrophic, with ships becoming trapped in temporal loops, officers seeing events before they occurred, shadows infiltrating every compartment with silent warnings, and hallucinations of human-controlled horrors leaving the surviving crews broken, whispering of beings that were everywhere and nowhere. And the galaxy began to realize that humans were no longer merely reactive, but proactive in shaping the cosmos through a form of influence that transcended technology and traditional warfare. And when another empire sent envoys to demand answers, the humans greeted them with calm hospitality, while simultaneously projecting illusions of destruction and despair that left the envoys trembling, their memories and perceptions subtly altered to instill an intuitive respect for human power. And across multiple systems, fleets began withdrawing preemptively. Treaties were quietly rewritten under fear of unseen consequences, and entire sectors surrendered control of critical resources not because they were conquered but because the invisible hand of human influence had guided them there, and even scientists studying the events admitted that no technology alone could account for what humanity had achieved, a mastery of space, perception, and terror that allowed them to manipulate outcomes across light years while appearing mundane, calm, and ordinary. And in this era of creeping dread, human fleets finally revealed themselves when necessary, emerging from the shadows not to destroy but to demonstrate, showing fleets and cities that humans could defend any world, manipulate environmental and spatial conditions, and project influence across vast distances, leaving alien observers simultaneously in awe and horror. And as these demonstrations intensified, whispers of Earth's hidden chambers, ancient, pre-human, and forgotten, surfaced, where dormant technologies and energies were activated to amplify human presence, creating fleets that could be everywhere at once, projecting illusions, controlling perception, and shaping the emotional state of entire species without direct confrontation. And when a coalition attempted a full-scale assault on a human stronghold, they were met with impossible scenarios, ships encountering duplicate realities, bridges looping into infinity, and visions of fleets burning that never existed, breaking the morale of even the most disciplined admirals. And yet humans themselves remained serene, coordinating every effect, guiding the galaxy into a new understanding of power. And as alien civilizations struggled to adapt, they recognized an uncomfortable truth. Humanity's horror was not cruelty, it was control, not destruction, but teaching, and at the patient, calculating. An inexorably intelligent species they had dismissed for centuries had finally revealed the scope of its dominion, reshaping the galaxy through terror, perception, and restraint. And, with every fleet that retreated, every colony that surrendered voluntarily, and every empire that recalculated its strategy in the shadow of human influence, the true horror became undeniable. The galaxy had awoken a force that could haunt, protect, and dominate simultaneously, a species capable of punishing arrogance, shielding the vulnerable, and projecting an influence so profound that no one could ignore it. And deep within the secret chambers of Earth, humans prepared for the final act, understanding that the galaxy now knew their power, but had not yet experienced its full weight, and that the ultimate reckoning, when it came, would be as terrifying as it was inevitable, reshaping every understanding of fear, respect, and the underestimated might of humanity across all known space. The galaxy's reckoning began in silence, as entire fleets halted at the edge of human-influenced space, their sensors reporting anomalies that defied physics, time, and sanity, and even the most confident admirals found themselves paralyzed by the realization that every previous engagement had been a measured demonstration of humanity's reach, not chaos. As fleets that one projected dominance now trembled at shadows and whispers, hallucinations of destruction and despair that human strategists had calibrated with precision, and when humans finally emerged openly in the rimward expanse, they appeared not as invaders but as guardians, controlling vast networks of space, manipulating perception, and projecting authority across countless systems, ensuring that those who had been aggressive or dismissive understood, in the most profound way, the consequences of underestimating them. And in one sweeping series of demonstrations, human fleets orchestrated events across multiple sectors. Simultaneously, entire battle groups vanishing only to reappear in positions that confounded calculations, stations experiencing environmental distortions that made survival impossible for unprepared crews, and shadows that moved independently, whispering in alien tongues, teaching respect, fear, and understanding. And as these demonstrations unfolded, colonies that had been threatened found themselves protected by invisible human influence, with aggression redirected, conflicts diffused, and civilizations guided away from destruction, creating a paradoxical mixture of horror and salvation. And alien leaders, once arrogant and dismissive, now bowed to the inevitability of human dominion, negotiating peace, surrender, and cooperation not because they were conquered by force, but because they had been confronted by a species that wielded fear, perception, and patience as weapons far more potent than any missile or fleet. And the galaxy realized that humans were not merely strong or intelligent, but a species whose restraint had been strategic, whose calm was deliberate, and whose awareness extended beyond ordinary comprehension, capable of influencing events light years away with precision and subtlety. And when the final coalition of empires attempted a coordinated offensive, they were met with an orchestrated series of phenomena, fleets trapped in loops of impossible geometry, entire battle formations rendered incoherent by illusions of overwhelming destruction, and commanders driven to madness by visions of their own empires consumed. And at every step, humans observed and guided, ensuring no unnecessary loss of life, yet instilling a fear so deep that surrender became instinctual, and as each empire yielded, the true horror of humanity became evident. They had been underestimated for millennia, their power disguised by patience and restraint, their technology, strategy, and influence intertwined with something older, something that bordered on the incomprehensible. And now, fully awakened, they stood as arbiters of cosmic balance, capable of haunting the stars, punishing arrogance, protecting the vulnerable, and reshaping civilizations, all while maintaining the serene facade of ordinary life. And in the aftermath, the galaxy existed in a new order, one where humans were recognized as forces beyond reckoning, whose calm yet terrifying dominion was absolute. And as fleets departed, colonies rebuilt, and empires recalibrated their understanding of power, Earth's command centers continued their quiet observation, knowing the galaxy had learned its lesson. Ignoring humanity's warning was no longer possible. The dead and the living alike whispered of shadows that carried both salvation and terror, and the stars themselves seemed to pulse with the presence of a species that had finally revealed its full weight, patient, calculating, unstoppable, and haunting, forever changing the definition of power, fear, and respect across all known space.